All right. Well, coming to you live, it is the Education Technology Situation Room. It is our 17th episode. Today is July 27th, 2016. I am Wes Fryer in my backyard in Oklahoma City, where we've had a thunderstorm pass through and another hot day. And I'm sure that Jason Neiffer has some better weather to report than we've had in Oklahoma. How are you, Jason?
Good, Wes. And yourself this week?
Yeah, good. So been back to work for a couple weeks, doing some iPad training and working on our student information system transition, which will be nice to have finished. But it's good. So we're having a lot of hot weather though, so I'm a little bit nervous for August. But
yeah,
who knows?
Yep.
Who knows?
And I'm joining live from Missoula, Montana tonight, where I am the assistant director and curriculum director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school in fabulous Missoula, Montana. And yeah, it's been pretty hot this week. We're starting. I'm suspecting we're gonna get our first 100-degree temperature sometime in the next 10 days. Which, to be honest, the fact that it's waited till end of July, early August is good news for us. It means that it's less likely that Montana will light on fire during the month of August. So it's been a relatively mild summer here. So that's been really great. The weather's been really beautiful.
I was actually thinking you guys didn't get quite that hot there, but you do. I mean,
we do. Yeah, it's. I wouldn't say it's necessarily every summer, although most of the last 10 or 15 years, the cities I've lived in Montana have gotten there. There was a stretch in summer 2006, 2007. I was living in Helena, Montana, the state's capital, located in kind of west central Montana, and we had a stretch in June of several days in a row that hit 105, 108, 110. And I remember joking with my wife, well, actually not really joking. I said, if this is the weather in Montana now, we have to move. So we can't do this. But yeah, we've definitely been having hotter summers in the last 20 years or so.
Yeah. Well, climate change is alive and well, and we just never know what we're going to get, and it's probably going to be different and exciting. So it's been a couple weeks since we broadcast, and do you have any doctoral news, actually, before we get into the technology news?
I do. Next Wednesday at 10 a.m., I will be presenting my proposal to my dissertation committee. So I'm very excited about that. I have quite a bit to do before next Wednesday. Not, no losing sleep or anything, but I'm going to do a little more digging in on my my measurement tool, and I'm kind of bulking up my research chapters, and I'm really excited to get the proposal phase done with. A couple weeks after that, I'll turn in a formal first 3 chapters of my study, and then I'll be in schools in the fall on the ground researching. So I'm really excited to kind of continue forward that progress.
That is awesome, and I don't necessarily want to derail you for the whole show, because I'm sure you could just speak for a few minutes on this topic.
Sure.
But you've only obliquely kind of mentioned that in the show. Can you give us just kind of an elevator pitch as far as what it is and what you're hoping to find?
Well, I am going to be studying the impact of direct integration of Siri in classrooms. I will be given access to a school district's middle school science classrooms, and we're going to measure whether or not the direct integration of that tool increases student engagement. And so I've been focusing my research on intelligent personal assistants, which is both an industry term and also a term as it relates to, there's a Google patent for intelligent personal assistants. And so Cortana, Google Now, Siri, what am I missing? Cortana, Alexa, Siri, Google Now. These are all intelligent personal assistants, and so the expansion of Alexa and how Alexa is starting to capture the imagination, I think, of a lot of consumers suggests that the voice interface is a big deal. And so it's early days, and it's been very interesting to research, particularly the broader topics of engagement, and also how technology impacts engagement. And so the research phase, which is always my favorite phase of anything related to my doctoral work, has been super interesting and something I'm looking forward to digging in on as a researcher.
And you're doing a mixed methods or straight quantitative, or what are you doing?
We're gonna term it at first as a quantitative study, but I probably will take some qualitative measures because I do plan on doing some direct observation of the impacted classrooms. And so, there's many potential ways that things could play out, and that's where I think some of the details we'll be hammering out with my committee in the next few weeks will help determine that. But the very bottom line is that there's a lot of interesting things that we could end up uncovering from this. It could be that middle school students just aren't that into it. I mean, that's also something we could also uncover as well. But I think it's important to do a good job at the research component of that, so we can have research to play off of and to cite. And if things go as planned, I'll be one of the first voices in this discussion of how this particular tool could impact the classroom.
Absolutely. And remember, you can always put some of those qualitative things in as appendices and things like that, and don't necessarily have to hinge your whole study on those pieces being done or being done thoroughly. So that is exciting.
Absolutely.
Well, for those of you that are perhaps joining us for the first time, we are aspiring to basically put an educational lens on the technology news. This has been a fun I don't know, it's not an experiment, but just get together and gathering for Jason and I on an almost weekly basis to have a chance to discuss articles. And it's given me a little bit more purpose and focus as I'm finding things to think about, well, will this be something for the EdTech Situation Room? So if you want to take a look at our links, you can visit our website at edtechsr.com and click the links, or just go to /links. And we've got a Google document, which Jason has faithfully filled in with many of the topics about Yahoo and Pokemon Go and some of the things that would probably be a little predictable. So we'll kind of kick out an article and give a little bit of analysis both ways on that. We'll probably share some kind of oblique fact, and we'll wrap up with a Geek of the Week. And that's kind of the plan. So you want to kick us off with one of your great articles for this week?
Sure. I think this is an interesting one because of how much the acquired property impact has had on education. But a number of sources, and the one I'm citing tonight is CNN Money, reports that Verizon is buying Yahoo for $4.8 billion. And there's a lot of people have probably been following the evolution of the sale of Yahoo. Marissa Myers, the CEO of Yahoo, former Facebook Google employee. Now I can't remember.
Google. Yeah, that's right.
And it's been the CEO to try to turn the ship that is Yahoo around. And the latest news in the last 6 months is that it's been ultimately up for sale. And as it turns out, the buyer that picked it up was Verizon for a pretty significant amount of money. $4.8 billion represents a big chunk for a company that is considered by some to be a company on its way out. But a couple things I've noticed from this discussion in the last couple of days. First, there are still 1 billion active users every month of Yahoo properties. That is nothing to sneeze at. And if a company like Verizon is seeking to become a content company as much as a kind of an infrastructure provider for cellular coverage, that certainly heads them in the right direction. I've heard a lot of news sources cite, for example, the America Online turnaround in the last few years, where they've become an owner of content properties, and now they've managed to make the evolution away from being an internet service provider to at least the owner of content properties. And one could argue that Verizon is poised to do so now with the acquisition of Yahoo.
Well, some of the things that I read about that were interesting. I think it was about 5 years ago that they had an offer from Microsoft, and I want to say it was at least 4 times the amount of today's almost $5 billion offer. So there's been a lot of depreciation there. So I guess that does it shows the relevance. The most valuable thing that Yahoo has, they're not putting on the block, and that are shares or a stake in Alibaba, which is a extremely popular website and service in China, which I'm kind of thinking, is that a little bit like eBay or Amazon? I'm not exactly sure. which one it's closest to.
I think it's close to both, actually, because I do think they do a lot of sales of third-party products through there. So it's kind of Amazon-y, but I think there's also kind of an eBay component to it as well. And it's funny you should mention that, because I did take a look the other day at all of the acquisitions that Yahoo's made over the past 20 years. And it's super interesting because there is a lot of things that are probably familiar, either new or old, that Yahoo owns or has owned at some point. A couple examples of this: GeoCities, which was one of the first places to host
back in the day.
Yeah, it's way old school, and I had a number of GeoCities site. My first classroom site was hosted on GeoCities in the late '90s, and they picked up the property and kept it around for a while. In fact, that's how I got my first Yahoo account, was migrating to GeoCities, and then ultimately it shut down, partly because better services came along and you didn't have to rely on advertising supported free website services because there are other options available. Other interesting things from their list of stuff, broadcast.com, and of course you may recognize that because that was the company that Mark Cuban developed, an internet radio company, and they bought that for $5.7 billion. The irony is not lost on me that that's less than what Verizon bought the whole company for, but that's what made Mark Cuban a billionaire. And then a number of medium and smaller size Web 2.0 companies, blogs, BLO.GS, which became eventually Yahoo 360, Brightroll, which was a series of on-time advertising. They tried to get their foot into video advertising. Classic Games, which eventually became Yahoo Games, which I lost a good percentage of time on in the early 2000s, playing online chess against others. Let's see, hotjobs.com, which became Yahoo Hot Jobs. These are all properties that Yahoo has picked up over time, and the number that Wikipedia puts it at is 114 different companies have been picked up over time by Yahoo, and many of them were shut down, and some of them became just branded Yahoo products, but they've been a major player in the internet since its consumer evolution in the mid-90s.
So what's the educational slant on this? Certainly, and I've mentioned this before, I'm worried about Flickr, what's going to happen. I know that, or I read that Verizon had purchased AOL, and part of that was for some of the ad monetization technologies or algorithms that they had. And so the thought is that Verizon is wanting to wed those potential advertising monetization code algorithms, whatever programs, to the eyeballs that are connected to Yahoo as far as all the properties that they have. Yeah, I'm a little bit pessimistic because Yahoo, Flickr is one of these amazing tools, one of the most amazing Web 2.0 tools I think that I started to use. It blows me away when you look at how many Creative Commons images are available on Flickr. In fact, the license I use the most is just buy, and so I'll go here and see, and there's 71 million photos right now that are licensed attribution only, and gosh, that has just skyrocketed, and there's 105 million in non-attribution, non-commercial, share alike. I guess those are the two biggest categories. Yeah, so Flickr is huge, and I just really hope that they are going to preserve it, not ruin it. It's a vibrant community of sharing photos, so that will have an impact. I know we're doing an iPad Media Camp at my school this week. I was in Tulsa last week for a couple days, and one of the websites I learned about from Tony Vincent a number of years ago, maybe it was only 2 or 3, is Photos for Class, and it's a website that gets Flickr licensed, Creative Commons licensed images, puts the attribution right on the actual image, and is, from what I've experienced, a very school appropriate, school safe, property for utilizing as an image search to do multimedia projects. So anyway, I from an educational standpoint, that particular property, Flickr is the biggest one. I scoured a little bit. I say scoured, searched briefly for some articles and found essentially people's expressing the same thing, like, wow, I hope that Flickr is okay, but nobody that had any inside information. But that'll be the thing that I'm going to watch the most. And I would say the other thing is just to think about the need to be reinventing and the need to be agile. We've seen Dell go private and really diversify itself even more so than IBM as far as products and services. We've seen, Apple, of course, be transformed from a computer company to, at one point, we were just thinking a music company. I mean, they were making more on the iPod and on iTunes than they were, I think, on the sale of almost anything. And then the iPhones exploded. But, in our environment of technology and rapid change, the importance of good leadership and maybe it's kind of like the innovator's dilemma too, right? The ability to take a company that's been successful in a particular niche and then can they reinvent? And we're seeing Microsoft, trying to do that and perhaps being a little more successful than I would have thought they might have been a few years ago. You just never know. So what do you see as the education horizon purchase?
Well, I think that you have to, go back to the point again that Flickr is a great example of this. Free services are fleeting, and there is and I think I even talked about this in a past episode, but the day Marissa Mayer was made CEO of Yahoo, someone bought the domain Dear Marissa Mayer and put a single page on there, please make Flickr awesome again. Dear Marissa Mayer, please make Flickr awesome again. And then started the hashtag Dear Marissa Mayer. And Flickr is a great example of a site that has passionate users. And I just looked at the number, 116 million users right now on Flickr. That's the current statistic. And that's a huge number of folks, but it itself is not a property that would probably survive on its own. And so I hope Verizon finds some use for it. I think Verizon could become a player on other people's phones, on other networks, if they start taking these things with it. But I would hate to even see what it would look like for you, Wes, to export your life's photo work on digital photos should it go away. And of course the Creative Commons search, which is unparalleled. There's no close service of photographs that are Creative Commons licensed like that. It would make a big difference. And so, user beware, that you got to be careful before you go all in on things. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that if you take a look at the list of acquired properties on the part of Yahoo, there are dozens that probably were some kind of magical tool. Actually, another one that's on this list is Delicious, which at one point was the social bookmarking site. Arguably, Pinterest has taken its place because it's a somewhat similar service, but once Delicious was purchased by Yahoo, it effectively died in the vine. And caution is always appropriate when utilizing these kinds of tools.
And just being ready to move, being ready to be flexible. My greatest tragedy in terms of a web tool that died was Posterous. I wrote a significant part of Playing with Media in 2011 talking about Posterous, and it was bought by Twitter, and they promptly reassigned all those engineers, and the company folded. And even though they had some people promise that Posthaven would carry on, it really hasn't. It hasn't captured that full functionality. So, I did tweet, and I can probably put in the show notes a link to a GitHub project that will do a full download of your Flickr images. And I probably should start doing that, right? I mean, I have, gosh, I guess I can pull it up and see, but it's like 40,000 or something insane, number of pictures. And at one time, I would diligently keep a folder on my laptop hard drive, and then I would upload to Flickr, but at some point I became just trusting the web. 43,895 photos on Flickr now. So I don't know. Alan Levine, who's I think I just breathed in a bug. The hazards of having a little light from my son's bedroom on me outside. Cogdog is his Twitter handle, and he's just a huge Flickr user and created Petcha Flickr and five card Flickr and all these different, great tools. He'll be somebody to watch because I know he'll be abreast of that. But anyway, we'll see what happens, and it is a sign of the times, and definitely we need to be ready to be flexible. And if Flickr goes away, it won't be the end of the world. It'll be huge, but these kind of things. They speak to the permanency or impermanence of things on the web. My friend Bob Sprankle died this last year in December, and his web content is still there. His registered domains are there. I started a project called Bob Taught Me, where I was, archiving, and I need to revisit that because, if somebody's not paying the rental fees on a domain, guess what? Unless you've moved it to the Internet Archive or somewhere like that, it possibly could go away. And so we talk about digital footprints living forever. Not necessarily. So anyway, there's some different sides to that as well. I know we need to talk about Pokemon Go. So do we want to go there next?
This week in Pokemon Go. A couple articles that are interesting. A couple weeks ago when we introduced the Pokemon Go phenomenon, and to be super clear, I'm not a player of the game. I downloaded it and literally had the app open for a minute and a half and decided that, I'm careful with addictive substances is the bottom line.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And so, I looks like it's great and interesting, and I've decided not to go in that direction to utilize it. But the couple things that have come out in the last 2 weeks that have been super interesting about that. The first one is that Apple is poised to make a ton of money off of in-app purchases for Pokemon Go. And the number that was tossed around in the article that I'm looking at from GSM Arena this week is $3 billion. And, and part of that is the incredible cash cow that Apple has in the app universe. There's a reason why that app developers tend to go to the iOS platform first. For some reason, their users tend to be more aggressive buyers of digital brouhaha than Android users, and so that is still the preferred platform for a lot of developers. But $3 billion is a massive amount of money, and then you start extrapolating that over the other addictive things over time: Candy Crush, the Simpsons game. The digital magazines that are being purchased on the platform, the going rate is 33% of the fee. You understand why Apple is the world's largest company financially, that they very cleverly monetized the app universe.
Absolutely. And hey, I think I figured out maybe why my camera was bad. Last time with bandwidth, I had adjusted my in Google Hangouts bandwidth to low, so I jacked that up. So I don't know. Maybe that was something. That's shocking, right? And we were talking about this with teachers. I decided not to do Pokemon Go either, but maybe last time I shared the app Hyper, which is a crowdsourced video app that lets you see things that are trending and choose things. And we started a 9-minute video that was all about how to do Pokemon Go, and watching about 2 minutes of that is enough to say, I don't think I'm going to do that. But it's also not something to ignore, right? As we've been talking about with teachers last week and this week, all kinds of kids are going to be talking about Pokemon Go. The technology is not new. Ingress was that game that merged the real. And hey, there are a lot of kids. We have a high school teacher, a Spanish teacher, who is in our iPad Media Camp, and he's on like level 7 of Pokemon Go. And then I've got a good friend who's like level 9, which I guess is pretty high. And anyway, the teacher was talking about how much more he's been getting out, and kids are getting out. And I mean, another teacher said, you cannot play this game and be sitting in your living room. You have to be out and going. My wife and I were downtown at Bricktown, which is our renovated warehouse district in downtown Oklahoma City, and there were lots of people who were having their phones out, and we're laughing at them. And of course, we didn't see anybody get hit by a car or anything dangerous happen, but it's a phenomenon, and the viral nature of that is pretty staggering. I dropped a link in that same set of articles that Nintendo shares plummet after investors realize it doesn't actually make Pokemon Go. And the article says that this wasn't new information, right? There's an app company that partnered with Nintendo it's not new, but somehow there were a lot of investors that didn't catch this, and they just assumed, oh, this has the Nintendo name, so that must mean Nintendo is going to profit handsomely. Now they could still monetize this in other ways, and that remains to be seen. But it has definitely been, I think, the digital viral phenomenon of the summer. I don't know if anything else can touch it, and I feel like we should take it as a challenge as educators. We have mobile devices. How are we encouraging our students to be mobile with their computing, right? We shouldn't just be staying in the room. I mean, we should no longer be tethered to the front of the room with our device, because we can AirPlay and use other kinds of technologies to be wandering around the room. But perhaps even more exciting, our students, if they have phones or tablets or can borrow one, they can be out capturing things, bringing content in, and yes, even connecting, geographic location to place and that kind of thing. So I think there's exciting things for us to think about because the gaming world is moving a lot faster than the educational world, for sure. And it also brings up the idea of coding, and of course getting kids involved in coding and not just consuming and that kind of thing. So
excellent. Okay, well, while we're on the notion of viral, 2 stories this week about the nature of the word billion. First, Apple has announced that it's sold its billionth iPhone. Apple had a quarterly shareholders call in the last week, and they actually exceeded Wall Street expectations of sales and profit. Of course, that only means something to Wall Street. Oftentimes, Apple sells unbelievable numbers of devices, but if they don't meet a kind of a random target set by Wall Street, then sometimes they will lose share value, even though they're selling incredible numbers of devices. But there are whole categories of items that never reach a billion, and for one brand name item to do that is an extraordinary achievement on Apple's part. And even if a lot of people are worried that Apple's turning stale, I do believe that they are a little behind right now as other companies catch up with them in terms of features and quality. I'm particularly talking about desktops and laptop computers, which I feel like Apple has been somewhat stagnant. But let's not forget that it's still the gold standard for status items and technology, and they've sold 1 billion iPhones since starting the smartphone revolution a decade ago.
And the momentum. I mean, you mentioned that earlier with the App Store, but the value of having an app ecosystem that performs fairly reliably on multiple devices, which continues to plague the Android world. And and with Swift Playgrounds, I haven't played with that yet. I guess that should be one of my fall goals, to figure out how to get into Swift Playground and start playing with that with some students or with some young people. But yes, Apple is a major player, and we're not going to see the Apple, Amazon, Google triad fade from view anytime soon, and we still have the hangers on, like Microsoft, which is still a huge player in innovating. And then we've got weird things happening, like we talked about with Verizon. I mean, if AT&T is my main service provider, but it just seems weird to have a web company like Yahoo bought by them. So anyway, it's $1 billion's a lot. How much stock do you have in those companies, Jason? Are you profiting handsomely from your foresight 2 decades ago?
Not enough. I will say that I'm a very, very minor stock user. And one of the things that I think is interesting about Apple is that again, everyone wants to be busy to kind of erect their obituary for people to mock. But the reality is that Wall Street was wringing their hands about sales dropping in Greater China is the category they use, and there were still $8.8 billion in sales to Greater China. One of the things that's also come out the last week is that there are a lot of very credible alternatives to iPhones in China that cost something closer to what a monthly salary might be for someone that works and lives in China. And despite that, there are still people that are willing to save up and buy a much more expensive device to have the status device of the iPhone. And there's just no parallel to that. And it's still the gold standard for high-end electronics, whether high-end is your goal or not. It very much is. And one quick note related to schools, obviously Chromebooks have taken a good percentage of the market away from schools. I think Microsoft has been resurging. The one of the examples where Microsoft has made a really savvy, or actually two examples where Microsoft's made a very savvy investment is in by Minecraft. They now have a foothold in schools like they've never had before. And like 3 or 4 years ago, when I knew more districts moving away from locally centered mail servers to Google Apps for education, I now know more schools making the transition away from Google Apps to Office 365 than I know schools that are moving towards Google. Now, part of that was Google was the first in the cloud marketplace for schools, giving away their product away for free. But it's a sign there that that's diversifying. But despite that, I still think, I would never buy 30 Android tablets for a classroom. I would happily buy 30 iPads for a classroom, even though they are less easy to manage than their open source cousins. So, it's a company that's been very resilient.
Well, I dropped a couple articles relating to STEM and space. SpaceX launched a successful rocket to send a door to the space station. That was from NPR on July 18th. And an interesting backstory, my friend Gail Lovely, who is an educator really focused on pre-K and primary age students and iPads, her husband just retired from NASA, and one of the things that he helped develop in his latter years was this door, which would be compatible with commercial space systems. So not only SpaceX, but also the Boeing, Lockheed, whatever this other collaborative is, that's really the main aerospace industry competitor to SpaceX. And so that is really exciting. So SpaceX, Elon Musk has some really grand plans. In fact, maybe I should drop that article. I think he unleashed some kind of grand plan too, where it's along the lines of solar and energy and really wanting to continue to disrupt the energy sector. But their plan with space was to it is to go to Mars and to not only be resupplying the International Space Station, but eventually to be a main contractor and be sending people, not just robots, to the red planet. So that was significant. And then the other article I dropped in, and I can't really vouch for this source, VOA News, but one of the Twitter lists that I follow on Flipboard is an astronaut list. So sometimes I get articles from them. And this is 5 years after the shuttle, NASA awaits commercial crew capsules. So, we're still waiting for the launch capacity, since the shuttle's been decommissioned, to be able to put human beings up in space without Russia's cooperation, then it's good that we're continuing to have this collaboration with Russia. It's also a little disconcerting with things that have happened with Putin, and we didn't put anything in there about these allegations that Russian hackers were responsible for the WikiLeaks release of all this information about the Democratic Party and trying to basically sabotage Hillary Clinton's campaign, perhaps because Putin would rather have Trump in there than Hillary. Anyway, on a STEM side and an education side, very important for us to be sharing with our students what's happening in space, what's happening with the commercialization of space, the opportunities. Our son is going to be headed to the Colorado School of Mines here in just like 3 weeks or something crazy. He's got to be there on August 18th. And one of the things in their museum, they've got this whole thing about space mining, right? Last year, the U.S. Congress just changed the law to say if a company, this is like Avatar, if a company goes out to space and finds stuff on an asteroid or on a planet, they can keep that and they can monetize that. So anyway, there's various sides to that issue, but it's exciting to see SpaceX successful because the last time they tried to send this door into space, that rocket did blow up. So
right.
It's good to see that continuing to advance.
Yep. I would add one other thing related to that is that when I see more commercial space expansion, here's where my mind goes, and it's admittedly it's down a couple pathways that require some linkage, but I know a lot of students that do traveling school programs where they're visiting Africa for 6 months or Eastern Europe for 6 months, or they're studying abroad as part of their high school education, and I just can't not think at some point, probably well within our lifetimes, that there's going to be an opportunity for 20 students to spend 6 months going to school in space. Like, I think that we keep providing more opportunities as the expansion of the private sector, which is working on making space travel cheaper and easier and more accessible to consumers, that at some point that's going to be kind of a huge deal. And, we already have a massive interest in, all the elementary schools that are developing experiments for space that go up in satellites or onto the space station and all the cool stuff that happens there. Imagine for a moment, 11 kids spending, 4 weeks, 4 months in space and studying there. And that's really going to spark, I think, a lot of interest in these subjects.
And we can't underestimate the importance of inspiring youth.
Yep.
Because when you hear, astronauts of yesterday and today talk about what inspired them and what moved them. Mae Jemison was and is our first African-American female astronaut. And one of my wife's students did a biography study and several reports about her this last year. And so I learned a little bit about her watching those media products. And, it's huge, the role that teachers play and the role that we can play in inspiring kids. So we sort of, we've had a real lull in space activity, in funding for NASA. Now it looks like the commercialization of space is going to continue to play a role. I was just checking NASA's Twitter channel, and they've just been tweeting a little bit about Orion. The last semester I was teaching STEM here about a year and a half ago. That was when Orion launched without people, but that was the first time we had sent a spacecraft into high Earth orbit beyond these belts that protect from cosmic rays and things like that. And so there's a lot going on, and that is hugely exciting. I mean, there's all kinds of drama happening with violence and terrorism and politics and political conventions and all of that kind of thing. And I think one of our opportunities that we have, being connected and being interested in technology and being interested in helping point students towards that, is raising awareness for things that, hey, if you just were turning on the radio today or turning on the news, you might have missed. And so that's exciting to see that stuff happening. And Jason, would you be signing up to do a study in space, or are you going to let that go to the younger generation?
There was a point of which I was pretty interested in space travel as a kid growing up. I think I'm good to go for now. But the thing about it, though, and in fact, I just changed my Geek of the Week link because of something I want to talk about related to this. But if they're going to have a commercial space station, I guarantee there's going to be a VR camera sitting somewhere in there to where you can pop your headset on. And by the way, and I don't know where mine's at, or I should grab it. I have a ton of things I should share this week. I finally bought a VR headset that I liked, and it turns out to be the ViewMaster headset, the old red. And have you seen these, Wes?
Okay, you need to do more than one Geek of the Week. I officially authorize you to do as many Geeks of the Week as you want.
I'm going to keep talking, and then I'm going to grab my headset. But a couple weeks ago on Prime Day, the Amazon Prime Day, the ViewMaster VR set was $13, down from $30.
Wow. I don't know about this.
So it's going to look really familiar, and I'm just going to jump in right now. So order be damned. So this is the ViewMaster VR headset, and it looks kind of familiar, I'd imagine, because it is a ViewMaster, right? And it actually comes with a little adapter that you can stick inside that allows you to play the old ViewMaster discs. So it's pretty impressive how it plays out. But I have an old cell phone that I have stuck in here. It happens to be a red one, so it fits the theme. And you pop it shut, and then it's a recognized Google Cardboard compatible system. And then your I just love how incredibly normal this always looks. But you can then, utilize the VR headset in that way. And I know, Wes, I've talked in the past about VR headsets, especially for classrooms. The cheap plastic ones are pretty important because they're more durable. They're not gross, because the cardboard one really was just meant to be just for you and not shared with others. But what I've been impressed with is that even people that kind of roll their eyes about technology to me, I've been able to stick the ViewMaster into their face, and as it turns out, it's impressive enough that it really does seem to be something. And so the link I put in this week's Geek of the Week was that I've been watching the political conventions the last 2 weeks. I'll save my political commentary for someone that wants to buy me a beer. And
I'll buy you a beer.
There you go. So what I love about 2016 is I didn't have to go to CNN. Or NBC or even C-SPAN. I was able just to go directly to the conventions via YouTube and see the official feeds that didn't have any commentary involved in it. But right now, at the Democratic National Convention is up. There is a live 360 camera sitting at the center of the convention, and right now there's 240 people watching live, and you can utilize your headset to be there and literally work around and see the various
I'm doing that.
And so that's there's just no equivalent to that. Like that's pretty sweet.
And see, if you're not joining us live, then you might miss that opportunity, because since I'm here live, I'm going to get my Google Cardboard headset out and see if is that open to Mac users as well, or is that just going to be an Android only thing?
Nope, you can jump in and spin around. You can just use the arrow key to look around, and then if you happen to have a cardboard,
it's through YouTube. It's that YouTube link then that you can hit and go to it from there.
Yep.
All right, folks. I'll tell you what I'm doing in about 15 minutes. I'm going to be in the VR world. So.
Yep.
And then that's the holodeck. My wife and I went and saw the new Star Trek this week, and she's a big Trekkie, and I don't know, it was okay. It was a little bit sort of Fast and the Furious, out in space with Star Trek characters. But anyway, I just always think about the holodeck whenever it comes to this kind of stuff with VR and how close. And it's Minecraft too. Minecraft's blocky, but I mean, the future is here. It's just not well distributed, and I don't have the source of that quote. That's I don't remember who said that, but this is an example of it, because we have folks who are living in the future, and people don't necessarily realize that. Sometimes with Pokemon Go or these other announcements, people get jolted to be like, what's going on? This is crazy. It's like, there's millions of people now with these devices that can connect and game and do all kinds of things and take videos and share them with the news, as we've talked about earlier as far as journalism.
Yeah, and in fact, I just saw that the other day. There was I think it was a Delta plane that had to land halfway through its trip, and I can't remember. I think it was the engine was on fire, but I saw the story, and they linked to a tweet of someone who was on the plane, and you go to the tweet and you see these photos that he took of the plane being disembarked, and then of course the response from he has 3 or 4 journalists that asked for permission to use his photo, and then one wanted to contact him to do an interview. And if you're a witness to a story, you're a witness to the story. I know, Wes, you're big into story chasing, and in fact, I think you were much ahead of most people in seeing this as the trend. But that's the bottom line: is that with I'll point to 2 devices. I have my cell phone with me. I have my ViewMaster VR headset with me, and these are incredible devices that have no parallel 30 years ago for personal use. These are just unbelievable, and take advantage.
And what is happening? I'm going to see if I get this right. Are these edge devices? I mean, what's happening in terms of central computing power and what we can connect to with high-speed connections? We don't have to have all that computational power and artificial intelligence and everything like that, in our hands, as long as we have that connectivity.
Right.
And the explosion of that is amazing. All right, William Gibson, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. So he's known for being the author of Neuromancer and being the Nor prophet of the cyberpunk genre of science fiction. So yeah, there you go. All right. Well, hey, that's a good geek of the week. I'll go. I went ahead and threw in another one since you, and I don't know if you had tweeted this one as well. I might have retweeted you, but Richard Byrne did a post on a crowdsourced list of Google Cardboard apps and videos. So totally along that line, check out what has happened from ISTE by putting up a Google form and saying, hey, what kinds of things can we do with Google Cardboard? That's something that's on my list as well to do this year because of Google Expeditions being now taken out of beta, and hopefully we're going to be exploring that. So I tossed that in, and then the other one that I put in, I actually played with last night, and it's an app called Prisma. It is it calls itself an art photo editor, but the example that I put in there, I think my wife said this morning, she's like, I think we should get that printed and put that up in our living room, which was kind of cool because I don't know that she's ever said that about something I've taken with my phone. But when I was in Montana, probably 4 years ago, and had a chance to go up to Going on the Sun Road and take some pictures, it was just, if I can envision what Eden might have been like, these beautiful waterfalls flowing down and green valleys and snow and mountains. And so anyway, Prisma has a bunch of filters, but it's more than just a filter, because it does some wonky stuff. There's a nice explanation to turn your photographs into artwork. And so I posted some of these on Instagram, and that was actually how I found out about it, because I saw somebody else's either post on I think it was on Instagram, not Facebook, and it's got a little watermark there in the corner that says Prisma. So every once in a while I venture into iPhoneography and playing around with those kinds of apps. So that's my geek of the week. And
then I've put in a Prisma photo that I took earlier this week. I'm really stunned by the app. Actually, it's really beautiful, and it does some really cool stuff.
How did you find out about it, and how long have you been using it?
I follow. There's a student that went to high school, or student that went to a high school I taught at several years ago. His name is Dave Morin. He was employee number 16 at Facebook, and I follow him, or I'm friends with him on Facebook, and I follow him on Instagram, and he's been using it for several weeks on his iPhone, and it just came to Android in the last week. So I had been kind of left out of the coolness then, but it's taken over my Facebook feed. Everyone has been jumping into it, and you are really right. They are filters by the straight definition, but they do a lot more than that, and really do take images and do something special with them.
And the thing I was struck by playing with it last night on the couch watching TV was just the processing power of the phone, right? I mean, the things that it's doing with ones and zeros and math algorithms, I know has got to be stunning. I mean, I remember back in probably 1997, 98 at our local television station. We lived in Lubbock, Texas. Got involved with LISD TV and doing some technology shows. And anyway, they had a Mac that they would run all night in order to make some very short, like 15 or 30 second, renderings. And, it's just unbelievable, the rendering and compression power that is now, in the phone. And I don't know that we're fully appreciating it, but when I'm looking at that app and I'm seeing all the stuff it's doing, I'm realizing that, oh my gosh, that at one point in the late 90s, Apple, they ran an ad campaign because their G4 computer was categorized as a weapon by the Department of Defense, and it was illegal to export it because the processing power was so huge. Well, that would be a pretty interesting thing now to say, here's your iPhone 6, and here's the processing power of the G4, considered a weapon by the Department of Defense in the late 90s. And I'm sure that what we've got now on our phones, just beats the socks off of that. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, we've got a couple minutes here to do an oblique fact. So do you have one on hand, or do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. I guess, what was I sharing today? One of the things that I've really enjoyed doing in workshops with digital storytelling is is just encouraging teachers to share something that some people would call their B-side. Marco Torres, I think, used to call it that, and Tammy Parks, who's an educator here in Howe, Oklahoma, does projects like that too. And so in the iPad Media Camp this week, it has been fun to really get some insights into, what people's different passions are and some of their backstory and things like that. So today we were talking about digital storytelling and how the Center for Digital Storytelling will at one time, and I don't know if they still do this, but in giving folks an idea for a prompt, we'll ask them to tell a story from a fork in the road, because whether it was a voluntary fork in the road that you took or something that just happened, and everything that occurred as a result of that. So my little story, and I don't know, maybe this relates too much to technology, but it was a real dream come true in probably 2010 because of a relationship, knowing Gerald Kinesic, who's a professor at North Texas. I got invited to go to the first 21st Century Skills Conference, we think, to be held in China for higher education. And I was together on a panel with Joe Lambert, who's the founder of the Center for Digital Storytelling. So here I am from Oklahoma doing a few things here with digital storytelling, and then the master, the Yoda, doing that. So anyway, that's just something that this week and last week, as I've been working with teachers, with iPads and things like that, continue to be reminded of, is the value of the B side, the stories that we tell, the relationships that and the connections that we make. And of course that, there's a role for technology to play in all of that. But it's something that's not necessarily natural, that people, all these kids, hey, I think I'm going to break out my smartphone and do a digital story today and tell this, compelling tale from my summer or from my life, or to record something that a family member or somebody else I know had. So I've had some encouragement this last week to remember the value of that and think about maybe, doing some of that with my devices in the weeks to come.
Excellent. Thanks, Wes. I guess the thing I would talk a little bit about is travel and the importance of and transformative power of travel. And my wife and I are starting to plan a big trip sometime, probably in the next 3 to 6 months. I have another friend a good friend of mine that's probably going to go to Poland at Christmas. We might follow him there for fun and then take another trip ourselves. But something that I'm increasingly aware of in a world where it's sometimes kind of scary to travel, that's, I think, that it's most important to get out during those times. And something that I've always valued, and I didn't really leave the country, Canada not counting, until I first went backpacking with my wife in the year 2000 in Europe. And if you have not done a lot of overseas travel, I think it's an addictive property once you do it. In fact, I literally was planning my next trip on the airplane home. I was so excited to be home. I'd never been away from the United States. In fact, even since that long, and I actually ate a Whopper in the JFK airport. I was so excited to get home, proceeded to immediately get really sick, but that's a whole different story, right? But I still, have been clamoring to go back ever since, and I've now, visited several countries and have been part of learning about other cultures. And not all the countries I liked equally, and some of them were fun and interesting, and some of them were, more of a slog to get through. But I think every time I have those experiences, it makes me appreciate. And this is the history teacher in me as part of it, but understanding others is a really important part of travel. And so it's a scary world right now for travel. There's obviously risks wherever you go. I keep thinking about there was the thing that happened overnight in northern France in the Normandy region, the thing with the church there and the ISIS claimed situation there. And I know that area. Like, I've been there. I can tell you about that area. I sometimes dream about that area, but that would never stop me from going back. And I think it's really important. And it sounds a little much to say in these times, but I think in these times it's most critical to get out and see the world. So travel.
And my thought on that is that another thing that should be incumbent on us as educators is to try to reach out and make those connections to people in other places, because you never hear the name of a country in the same way when you have a friendship with someone who is from that country or lives there. Speaking as an exchange student in high school and someone who's feel very fortunate to have been able to travel a considerable amount. It just, not everybody is going to be able to make those trips, but telling the stories of those trips, but then finding ways to make those connections. So that's probably, I probably need to start a list now of some priorities to try to do for this year, because I know we've got some teachers that have been doing some pen pal projects and continue to do those and amplifying those and the value of that, because it really not to get too serious on us, but I mean, we've got to find ways to move forward with understanding each other, understanding folks from different backgrounds, from different places, and unfortunately, part of what the media is doing today is really amplifying negative outliers, and so part of what we can do is amplify the opposite, amplify the positive, and maybe those are outliers, but still, being able to draw attention to those things and encourage our students to form relationships and learn in a different way, right? Because international travel and even you're going to have an exchange student. I mean, I know that's going to be life changing. You're never going to think about that country and those folks the same, because you're going to have that personal connection. So anyway, maybe that's an encouragement, and we want to close here by telling you where you can connect with us, but also inviting you to write a review on iTunes. You can give us a star rating, and you can help let other people know about the podcast. Please follow us on Twitter at EdTechSR. And you can also, I think we should set up a cross post, but we've got a Facebook page that's out there. And one of the things that we may do, we've kind of migrated from Blab. Peggy George did confirm last week that there are a lot of folks doing web shows and things that have migrated from Blab. So we may be staying here on Google Hangouts, but we also might experiment with some other things like Facebook Live and those other things. But Jason, where can people find you, and where are you sharing digital content these days?
Well, my name is Jason Neifer, and I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy. You can follow Montana Digital Academy at MontDigAcad on Twitter. And then personally, I blog at the NCCE Tech Savvy Teacher blog.ncce.org, and I am Tech Savvy Teach on Twitter, where I do read a lot of media, both kind of straight up news, and then a lot of ed tech and technology news. I try to share out the best bits every day via my Twitter account. So I will see you online. What about you, Wes?
So I'm W. Fryer on Twitter. I generally am now tending to share articles on Flipboard. So if you Google Flipboard, Wes Fryer, you'll find my iReading, which I'm consuming and sharing on my iDevices. And so that's why I say iReading, and I'm reading them too. So I don't know, it's play on words, but you can find articles there. This summer, in fact, in the last couple of weeks, I've done a lot of updates for iPad Media Camp, because I led a 2-day last week in Tulsa, and a 3-day camp this week. So you can follow iPad Media Camp on Twitter, and probably most interesting if you're doing iPad professional development, all of the curricula for every iPad Media Camp of the last 4 years is available on an open Google site. And so you can go to iPadMediaCamp.com and click curriculum. And the new twist on that this year has been a matrix of projects and apps, and looking at things that are whole class, single app using Seesaw, 2 app, and then multiple app or app smashing. So anyway, please reach out to us. Let us know if you've listened to the bitter end. We appreciate it, and we will hopefully be coming to you again on Wednesday. We're in almost every weekly show, and while I don't know if we had any live viewers, we generally, we'll have folks that listen, and on the audio probably more, but we do have video feed as well as audio feed that you can subscribe to. So please reach out to us, and if you are interested or have a suggestion for a teacher, educator, somebody who can contribute to our conversations about the news, let us know. I had a couple people reach out to us this week wanting us to promote their product or their new study, and that's really not our game. But if there's somebody that would be interested in talking to us about EdTech news, then it'd be fun to have them on the show. Have a good night, everybody.
Everyone.